They say life's sharpest edge cleaves you into the person you were before and the person you become after. I discovered this truth on what was supposed to be my wedding day. I was 27 years old, standing in a sunlit chapel filled with white roses and soft music, heart pounding with the kind of bliss only first love can bring. The summer air drifted in through stained glass windows, carrying the scent of fresh lilies and the distant murmur of congratulatory laughter. In my mind, I saw his face, David's face, approaching, confident and steady, dressed in his military uniform, pride shining in his eyes. I imagined myself stepping forward, the soft rustle of my gown whispering down the aisle, finding him at the altar, and beginning a life we had planned since the day he slipped that ring onto my finger under the glow of fireworks. In that moment, I believed our future was certain and unbreakable. But the moment that changed everything shattered expectations. As the organist played our wedding processional, I steadied myself, clutching the bouquet of white roses with trembling hands. I saw my father's proud smile from the corner of my eye. My mother dabbed at tears. My sister beamed. The entire congregation watched, leaning forward, waiting for the bride. I took a breath, lifted my veil, and took my first step. But with every passing second, David did not appear. A hush fell over the room. The kind of hush that makes you aware of every heartbeat, every whisper, every rustle of silk. My heartbeat raced and then stuttered. My steps faltered. Suddenly, my world tilted. I reached the front and saw the minister's gentle face cloud with sorrow. He glanced at the back of the church, hesitated, and then leaned in. His words fell into my ear like stones. "He won't be coming. He's gone." I felt my knees buckle, as though something vital had been pulled from beneath me. The room spun in that instant. I remember the hush fading to murmurs. Gasps echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Faces blurred, concerned, confused, horrified. I stood frozen, held upright only by the gown's stiff bodice and the white roses constricting my fingers. Time slowed. Somewhere a clock ticked. Then another. I felt an emptiness expand in my chest, and an ache unfurl that would become the cornerstone of every choice I made afterward. He left me at the altar for someone else, a civilian woman he met on base during his most recent deployment. A kind face I had never seen, a name I would never know, a kind of pain that cleaved my dignity to splinters. In that single abrupt moment, I knew heartbreak so deep that tears refused to come. Instead, I felt anger, shame, embarrassment. I wanted to run, to hide, to vanish. But I did not. I stood powerless in front of 100 guests, my white dress, a symbol of a promise he had abandoned. The roses in my hand felt like shards of ice. The silence of the congregation felt like a courtroom where I was found guilty of some unseen crime, of loving too much, of trusting too openly, of believing in always. I wanted to scream, to storm out, to slap him for betraying yearnings I thought we shared forever. Instead, I stood mute and trembling until my mother helped me outside. The sun was bright, mocking me with its warmth. Cameras snapped from the driveway. Reporters, I later learned, waited for the scandal of a military wedding gone wrong. People gawked. Some whispered. The world's eyes felt like lasers on my back. I crawled into my car, the engine's hum drowned by my heart's thunder, and I drove away without any explanation, unable to grasp why he had chosen anyone over me. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of unanswered calls, unopened letters, and sympathetic visits that I kept at arm's length. My phone's screen lit up with texts from friends. "Are you okay? Tell me what happened. He must be in an accident." I ignored them all, because there was only one truth I could not unsee. David had deliberately walked away from me. He had traded our years of laughter, our plans, our dreams, for something, and someone, new and unknown. I felt adrift in a storm of confusion. I had dreamed of a white picket fence, a house filled with laughter, maybe children running in the yard. Instead, I felt like I was standing on a cliff's edge, the sudden void below threatening to pull me in. I realized that feeling broken was like a kind of dark gravity. No matter how many times I told myself to rise, I kept being dragged back down. I spent sleepless nights replaying every conversation we ever had, every "I love you," every plan to buy matching towels, every dream of a future together. Why had I never seen it coming? How was it possible to be so close to someone and yet so far away? The answers eluded me, but soon a different question replaced them. Who was I without him? That question was like an ember in the black, small, burning, dangerous. It glowed and threatened to ignite a fire beneath all my brokenness. It was a question I had never asked myself because my life's blueprint had always included David. We made decisions about careers, about apartments, even about pets, always as a pair. Now the blueprint was gone, torn to shreds in the dusty halls of that chapel. I had two choices: become a victim of my pain, or let that pain sculpt me into someone new. I chose to be the latter, and it started with a single radical decision. I signed my papers to enlist in the army. I know what you're thinking, that a broken-hearted woman running to the military is a cliché, that it's some dramatic trope for movies or books. But this was real life for me. The decision felt like diving headfirst into fire, scary, irreversible, but somehow necessary. I wanted structure, discipline, a mission bigger than myself, and most of all, I wanted to feel powerful again. Not as David's fiancée, not as the girl he broke, but as a soldier, a part of something greater than my heartbreak. My parents wept on the phone. My friends begged me to reconsider. They said I would regret it. They said I was doing it because of him. Maybe they were right. But when I signed on that dotted line, I felt something shift. A darkness I could not name sank into the pit of my stomach, but alongside it, a fierce determination took hold. It whispered, if he thought I couldn't, I would show him I could. Basic training was, in a word, relentless. The moment I arrived, I felt like prey in a lion's den. Everything was stripped away: personal clothes, identities, comfort. In came drills, ridicule, exhaustion. On day one, I fell behind on a 2-mile run. My legs felt like jelly, and the drill sergeant's voice thundered in my ear, calling me out. I felt my face burn with shame as he barked orders, and all I could think was, just finish the run. My lungs felt on fire. My lungs wheezed like an old engine. But I kept going, step by labored step, until I crossed the marker. It wasn't impressive. I was near the back of the pack, but I didn't quit. The days bled together. Sunrise wake-up calls, push-ups, until my arms trembled, obstacle courses that left me tasting dust, endless marching drills that felt like punishment, designed to break the spirit. Every night, I collapsed into a bunk, body aching in ways I didn't know possible, mind replaying every humiliation. I vomited in the latrine more than once. On the 4th week, I hit a breaking point, literally. During a timed ruck march, my ankle twisted beneath me. I fell hard, pain exploding up my leg. The medics told me I'd sprained it. They gave me tape and painkillers and told me to keep going, or I'd be recycled to try again next year. I stared at the ceiling of the med tent, sweat mixing with tears I refused to shed earlier, and asked myself, was this what I signed up for? The answer roared back, yes. In the darkness of that tent, I made a promise. No matter how many times I fell, I would get back up. I taped my ankle looser, limped back into formation, and completed the ruck march, agonizingly slower than everyone else. But I crossed that line. That moment taught me that grit isn't about winning. It's about refusing to lose. It's a stubborn flame that refuses to extinguish, even when the world tries to snuff you out. As weeks turned into months, I learned to adapt. I stopped listening to the drill sergeant's insults as personal attacks. I started to see them as sharpeners of character, honing me into something harder, colder, stronger. I learned to fire a rifle, never blinking as the recoil shook my shoulder. I learned to navigate by map and compass, swallowing dust on training ranges under a scorching sun. My world shrank to the rhythms of cadence calls, chow lines, barracks inspections. I discovered muscles in my body I never knew existed. They ached and demanded more. My hands toughened to calluses. My feet grew calloused too, but I embraced the pain. Pain meant I was alive, I was changing, I was pushing beyond what I ever thought possible. By graduation, I wasn't just a soldier. I was one of the few women in my platoon whom the instructors celebrated. They called me more the munitions, more the machine, more the indestructible. I didn't love all these nicknames, but I accepted them as proof that I was no longer the broken girl at the altar. I was a warrior, and the world would have to see me as such. My tears were gone, or they were reserved for secret nights in the barracks when the lights were off and the world was quiet. Then I let them come, brief, sharp, releasing a fraction of the tension tethered to my chest. But outdoors, in front of my squad, I was resolute. I was steel. I advanced quickly through the ranks. At every turn, I refused to be just the girl who enlisted after a broken engagement. I volunteered for leadership roles, devoured tactical manuals, ran extra drills at night when the rest of my unit was sleeping. I went to airborne school, learned to jump out of a plane into nothingness. I went to Ranger school and survived 30 days of hell, constant physical exhaustion, mental fatigue, sleep deprivation. I remember the first time I crawled under barbed wire through a river, wearing soaked clothes that weighed me down, and hearing a drill sergeant's voice booming, "Move, more. Move, soldier." My arms burned, my lungs cramped. I could feel the cold water numbing my skin. Part of me wanted to give up, but another part, an ember fanned by the wind of my betrayal, roared back to life, "You're stronger than this. You are not a victim." And I did not give up. I crawled until I crossed that finish line. When I emerged, a Ranger tab was pinned to my chest. I stood a little taller that day. Promotion to first lieutenant, promotion to captain. Each rank came with a weightier sense of responsibility, a broader scope of command. I was stationed overseas. Germany, South Korea, Iraq. In each country, I led different squads: infantry, logistics, intelligence. I learned to coordinate air support, plan convoys through volatile regions, negotiate with local leaders, reassure frightened civilians. I saw war's ugliness: villages leveled, children whose innocence was stolen, soldiers who returned as shells of themselves. I also saw camaraderie's beauty: men and women from diverse backgrounds, united by purpose. I found mentors who guided me, peers who respected me, subordinates who trusted me. I built a reputation for being fair but unyielding, approachable but firm. They said I was a natural leader, but in my mind, I was still chasing something intangible, a validation I didn't yet allow myself to fully acknowledge. It was during a deployment in northern Iraq that I finally felt the transformation complete. A complex mission to secure a strategic bridge, preventing insurgents from cutting off critical supply routes. We planned for weeks. Satellite imagery, topographical maps, satellite phone lines. I briefed my company at dawn, pointing to the ridge where our snipers would set up, the river's bend we'd cross at midday, the potential enemy spots in the grove behind us. I watched the faces of the soldiers, young men and women, some fresh from training, some hardened by multiple tours. They looked to me for answers. I felt the gravity of command settle deep in my bones. Our mission required coordination: helicopters to suppress enemy fire, armored vehicles to escort supply trucks, medevac teams on standby. On the morning of the operation, as the sun crested the horizon, we moved out. The firefight was brutal. Bullets whipped overhead, engines roared, the air stunk of gasoline and fear. At one point, an IED exploded near our convoy. The ground shook. Dust and debris filled the air. My radio crackled. "Captain Moore, we have wounded at grid 47. Over." My heart spiked, but my voice stayed steady as I ordered medical teams forward, directed reinforcements, and coordinated evacuation routes. I ran through the chaos, my adrenaline surging. I found Private Lewis, bleeding from his leg, fear in his eyes. I knelt beside him, applied a tourniquet, told him to hold on. My medic arrived seconds later. As I looking around, directing teams, rallying my soldiers forward, I felt the decades of my life converge. The girl abandoned at the altar, the civilian turned recruit, the soldier forged in blood and discipline, all melding into one resolute figure who refused to break. We secured the bridge at dusk. The operation succeeded with minimal casualties. High command praised my leadership. We returned to base, exhausted but victorious. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, I allowed myself a rare moment of stillness. I thought about the journey from that chapel's silence to this controlled chaos, and I realized I had become the woman I was always meant to be. When I received my promotion packet naming me a captain in charge of a large-scale joint training exercise in Europe, I knew the moment of reckoning had arrived. It was the sort of high-visibility mission that would decide futures. NATO allies, allied nations, and U.S. troops pooled together for a simulated urban warfare scenario. I would oversee strategy, logistics, and coordination between multiple battalions. It was the pinnacle of my career so far, a chance to stand head and shoulders above my peers and prove I belonged among the top echelons of leadership. I designed the scenario, an improvised cityscape with mock civilian populations, multiple entry points, booby traps, and embedded informants. The days before the exercise were a whirlwind of briefings, maps, strategy sessions. I pored over satellite photos, walked through the mock city, tested communication lines, and drilled every contingency. My team respected me. The junior officers took notes when I spoke. The NCOs fell in line without hesitation. I felt that familiar sense of purpose settle around me, tight and invigorating. On the first day of the training, I entered the command center early, Computers hummed, screens flickered with maps and troop movements. My staff captain, Lieutenant Perez, approached with a stack of personnel files. She handed them to me, folded neatly. "Captain, here's the final roster for the battalion commanders. They've arrived from all over. One of them is Staff Sergeant David Carter." Her voice was calm, professional, but I saw the flicker of surprise as she waited for my reaction. "David, my ex-man say, now a staff sergeant assigned under my command." The words felt like a thunderclap in my mind. My breath caught. For a moment, I saw that chapel again. White dresses, empty altars, hushed murmurs. But in the same blink, I saw myself rising from that chapel, enlisting, pushing through pain, earning every rank, every medal. I closed the folder. "Thank you," I said evenly. No emotion, no hesitation. I turned my back and focused on the screens. My mind moved to strategy. My heart slammed, but I controlled it. 5 years had passed since the altar. I was no longer the girl he left. I was Captain Alina Moore. When he entered the command center that morning, I noticed at once how he looked older. Thicker shoulders, closer cropped hair, a fine line of fatigue under his eyes. Yet he still held that unmistakable military bearing. He stood at attention when I walked in, respect etched in every inch of his posture. We locked eyes briefly. I nodded, acknowledging him, not as a former fiancé, but as an officer. Protocol demanded nothing more. He fell in line, joining his squad in the briefing area. I addressed the assembled officers. "I'm Captain Moore. Welcome to Exercise Iron Shield." My voice was firm, authoritative. The words carried weight across the room. I outlined the strategy. He listened. I saw him glance my way again, quick, almost reflexive. I ignored it. This was no longer about us. This was about the mission. For 3 days, I watched him operate under stress. I watched as he led his squad through mock clearing operations, how he communicated with my subordinate officers, how he responded to changing threats. I saw him sweat under the fluorescent lights, saw the way his jaw clenched when things went sideways. An ambush triggered too early, a simulated IED discovered too late. He adapted, he learned, but always, he did so under the shadow of my command. This dynamic felt strange. If I had met him on the street, I would have passed without a second glance. Here, however, in uniform, in formation, he was subject to every order I gave. He had once been the center of my world. Now he was one soldier among many, albeit a good one. In our brief interactions, I noticed he was more reserved, more introspective. He avoided eye contact off duty. When our paths crossed by chance in the mess hall, he didn't approach. Instead, he stood at the back of the line, silent, vigilant. I watched him from across the room as I sipped coffee, his posture tense as though waiting for me to call on him. But I didn't. I let him stew in his uncertainty. On the final evening of Exercise Iron Shield, the training concluded with a simulated extraction. The scenario: Allied forces had to rescue a high-value civilian liaison from a contested zone deep within the mock city. The tension was real. We simulated casualties, disorientation, and inclement weather. I commanded from the Tactical Operations Center, coordinating nav assets, ground troops, and intel updates via secure comms. I gave orders crisply. At one point, I saw David's squad pinned down by opposing forces in the simulation. They were supposed to hold a block until reinforcements arrived, but the enemy shifted tactics. He patched through a distress call. "Captain Moore, this is Sergeant Carter. We're being overrun, requesting immediate extraction or we'll lose the civilians, scenario critical." His voice was steady, but I heard the edge of real panic. I took a deep breath. "Sergeant Carter, hold your position. Alpha Team is 10 seconds out. Secure those civilians until we can smoke their exit." I tapped the console. My 17s rose from the virtual airfield. Drones adjusted angles. Seconds later, my team's vehicles rolled in. The extractions were successful, Simulation 1. After the exercise, awards were distributed. I stood on the podium, medals pinned to my chest. The lights shone bright. Media cameras clicked. My speech was a formality, thanking my staff, the Allied forces, my subordinates. And then came the final salute. As protocol dictated, all personnel in attendance were required to render honor to the commanding officer. I scanned the formation, difficult to believe, but there he was, David Carter, his hand snapping to his forehead with disciplined precision. A soldier saluting a superior officer. In that instant, the world narrowed to the rigid line of his arm, the angle of his head, the square of his jaw. I felt something like triumph simmer in my chest, tempered quickly by a calm understanding. This wasn't about winning a petty revenge. This salute represented everything I had become, someone worthy of respect, chosen by merit, hardened by trial, commanding by right. I returned the salute smoothly. "Carry on, Sergeant Carter." He dropped his hand and stepped back. The moment ended as quickly as it began, but its echo resonated in my mind. Thunderous, inevitable, like a closing verdict I never knew I was waiting to hear. That night, after the formalities ended and the troops dispersed to flop onto bunks or gather around small tables for drinks, I found him standing outside the operations center. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of diesel fumes and late-night rain approaching. I approached slowly. We regarded each other in silence. He was unshaven, fatigued, eyes shadowed, not with dirt, but regret. I could almost see the words he wanted to say dancing on his tongue, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said. My voice was soft but unwavering. He flinched. He looked down. "Finally," he spoke. "I didn't expect to see you like this," he said, voice low. "A captain, in charge, leading men and women into battle simulations. It's impressive." "Thank you," I replied. "I didn't join to impress you." He winced. "I know." He paused, searching my face. "I've thought about that day, our wedding, every day since. I was a coward. I thought I needed to be free, to find something simpler. But I never found it. Instead, I found emptiness." His eyes met mine again, shadowed. "Seeing you today, it hit me. I lost the only person I should have never taken for granted." I tilted my head. "Regret doesn't change the past." "I know." He shifted, uncomfortable. "But I wanted to say sorry. To tell you, spare me the apology," I said, cutting him off. My voice carried no malice, only clarity. "You apologized in that chapel when you walked away. You don't get a second apology." He flinched as though struck. I thought maybe I could explain." His shoulders slumped. "I thought maybe you'd understand." "I understand this much. I was standing alone at the altar, humiliated in front of hundreds of people, because you chose someone else," I said. "I spent years rebuilding myself from the ruins you left behind." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so his ears were the only ones who heard. "I became this person, this captain, because I refused to let your betrayal define me. I found my strength, my purpose, and my identity without you. That's the only explanation I need." He remained silent, eyes fixed on mine, grief and awe and something like resignation playing across his face. Finally, he nodded slowly, as if absorbing the weight of my words. He looked at his boots, then back at me. "You're right. He stopped himself. I'll remember what you said." I turned to walk away. "Good." My footsteps echoed against the pavement. Behind me, I heard him inhale sharply, but I kept going. There was nothing more to say. The sun was rising over the horizon now, pale light bleeding into the clouds. My breath was calm, measured. For the first time in years, my heart felt still. The weight of that altar had lifted. The humiliation, the shame, the endless questions, all dissolved in the clarity of who I had become. I walked back to my quarters reflecting on the ironies of life. I had once dreamed of white roses, wedding vows, candlelit dances. Instead, I had marched through mud, survived firefights, earned accolades, and ultimately become the commanding officer who stood resolute when David saluted. He saluted not because he was forced by protocol, but because he recognized my worth, my rank, my journey. It was a salute that encapsulated regret, respect, and the realization that the girl he abandoned had grown into a leader he could never surpass. In the weeks that followed, I continued my military career, accepting new challenges, further deployments, advanced strategic courses, and mentoring younger officers. The salute remained a pivotal moment in my mind, an emblem of a wartime shrine dedicated to the battle I fought within. Occasionally, I received letters from cadets and young soldiers, many of whom had heard whispers of my story. They told me how they, too, felt broken by love, by life, by circumstances beyond their control. They said my story gave them hope, that seeing a woman rise so fiercely reminded them that the darkest moments can serve as the kindling for unimaginable strength. I never responded with "he left me," but I joined the army. I simply wrote, "Find your fire, let it forge you. You are stronger than you know. There are days I still think of David, how he once held my hand, how his laugh used to fill the room, how I believed we would grow old together. Those memories no longer hurt. They serve as reminders of lessons learned, of the roads not taken. I've made peace with the fact that his path diverged from mine, and for that I'm grateful. If he had stayed, I might have remained that woman in a white dress, confined by expectations, untouched by the crucible of war, never truly realizing my potential. I might have been the story of a jilted bride who faded into obscurity. Instead, I became a testament to resilience, a soldier who stands at the forefront, commanding respect, forging unity, and inspiring those around me. This is my truth. Vengeance is not cast in the echo of a scream or the flash of a blade. True revenge, if you can even call it that, is becoming the person you were meant to be, stronger, wiser, unbroken, so that one day, the one who tried to break you looks up and sees in your eyes the unspoken truth. You are no longer the person they abandoned. You have grown, evolved, and ascended to heights they could never imagine. You stand not in an altar, but on solid ground, in uniform, bearing medals that sing of battles won, both on the field and within your own soul. So if you ever find yourself standing alone in a chapel, dreams shattered, feeling like there's nothing left to hope for, remember this. The ashes of heartbreak can nourish an inner fire if you let them. You will stumble. You will bleed. You will question your worth. But if you hold on to that ember, nurture it in the darkest hours, it will become a beacon, guiding you toward a destiny you couldn't conceive when you were broken. And one day, just when you have finally grown beyond recognition, the one who hurt you may stand at attention before you, hand raised in salute. They will recognize not who you were, but who you have become. And in that moment, you will know. You have won. We invest our enough time to create these videos. Kindly subscribe, like and share the video. And if you have any questions, comment below. Thanks for watching, mate. Bye.